All right, so I am going to go verse by verse and just kind of talk through and explain what's going on in this passage so that we have a better understanding of it. And then at the very end, we're going to try to make this as practical and applicable as we can. So starting in verse 1. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. So last week, Jesus was in Galilee. And if you look at how Jesus has been moving, Jesus was in Jerusalem, then he went over to Samaria, spent a couple days in Samaria, then he went up to Galilee, and he was in Galilee for a whole 7 verses, and then he goes back to Jerusalem. So obviously, everything that is written, so the Gospels that we have doesn't have every single thing that Jesus did, right? So these disciples, when they were writing, these apostles, when they were writing down these stories, when they were writing the Gospels down originally, man, they were highlighting certain things that Jesus did. And John even says in the last verse of the book of John 21, verse 25, he says, now there are also many other things that Jesus did. Were every one of them to be written, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. So, I mean, that's a pretty intense statement. But anyways, John is essentially saying, dude, this isn't everything that Jesus did. There are so many more things that Jesus did, and we notice that right here, because he wasn't in Galilee for 5 seconds and then traveled back to Jerusalem, because that's a super long journey. But anyways, he's coming down to participate in one of the feasts of the Jews. And there are 3 different feasts. There are 3 major feasts or major festivals, whatever you want to call them, that the Jews were required by law to travel to Jerusalem. One of them was the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which we know as the Passover, right? Which is where they would celebrate, they would remember, commemorate, whatever word you want to use, when the angel of death passed over the houses that had the blood of the lamb on the doorstep, and the doors that didn't have the blood of the lamb, the firstborn of every family and animal was killed. And that was the last straw. That was the last thing that Pharaoh let happen to his people before he actually told the Israelites that they can go, before he told Moses, man, take your people and get the heck out of here. The other feast that they did was the Feast of Weeks. And the Feast of Weeks, this was 50 days after the Passover. And the reason that they would do that is they would remember that was kind of the very end of the quote unquote Exodus, of them really getting out of Egypt and them coming to Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is where Moses goes up and God delivers the law. So they have this festival, the second festival, that they go to Jerusalem to celebrate this. And then the last one, man, sorry, this is just knowledge, but send it. The last one is the Festival of Tents or something. The Feast of Booths, right? Which is tents, booth, same difference. What they would do in this feast, they would travel down to Jerusalem, and what they were remembering, they would literally stay in these booths. They would make these little tents, and they'd sleep in them. I think it was for a week. But anyways, what that was remembering is how they were stuck in the wilderness for 40 years because of how they reacted to God, because they made the golden calf and did all this other stuff. They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years before entering the promised land. So anyways, I shared all that with you because I'm trying to, was there more of a reason than the reason I'm sharing? No, this is the reason. I'm sharing that with you because commentators don't know what feast this is. It could have been any of these 3, but whatever. That's what we're doing. We're studying the Bible, okay, man? This is information. It's in the Bible. It's good to know. Let's keep moving. Verse 2 and 3. Now, there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool. And we're going to do this again, man. I'm about to do the same thing. In Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. And in these days, a multitude of invalids, blind. And in these lay, there it is, a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. So in Jerusalem, this is something that's pretty cool about this, is that this was one of the verses that people that like atheists and people that don't believe that the Bible is the word of God, they used to use this verse to try to prove that the Gospel of John was not, in fact, an accurate historical gospel, because they were saying there is no sheep gate and pool with like 5 colonnades or 5 like different decks around it near the temple. So you guys are wrong. But then I think it was in like 1953, there was this archaeologist. I think he was Canadian. That doesn't matter though. Anyways, he went to Jerusalem and they were excavating, that's the word, right? Excavating, archaeologizing the area, and they found the sheep gate. And then right next to the sheep gate, believe it or not, they found this pool. And then as they were continuing to unfold all of this stuff going on, what did they find? 5 different colonnades, 5 different decks. Isn't that crazy that the Bible's true? No, it's not. That's what we believe. But it's just super awesome, man, when God just proves that the Bible is accurate and true, whether it's through like the scientific, whether it's through science, whether it's through archaeology, look that up. Archaeology, it's just incredible. And it just solidifies like, man, what we believe is true. The Bible said it was there way before current historians and anyways, I just thought that was really cool. But the sheep gate, now let's talk about the sheep gate. Dude, we're just getting deep into this stuff right now. So I don't know if this is applicable. Maybe this is applicable for you. Maybe God speaks to you in some crazy ways. We talk about the sheep gate, but let's do it. The sheep gate was part of the temple where they would bring in the animals for sacrifice at the temple. So it was a specific gate that people would enter into with their animals. And then near that was this pool. And if you guys, there's this verse, let me read it, because it's not in this, they don't have it in the ESV, but they have it down here in the footnotes. It says, verse 4, "For an angel of the Lord went down at certain seasons into the pool and stirred the water, and whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was healed of whatever disease he had." So this, what is believed to be here, this pool was probably like some kind of natural spring. And the reason why that verse, if you guys, does anybody have that verse written in their Bible? Can you raise your hand if it's like actually written in your Bible? Okay, so the reason for that, some Bibles put this in there, and then some Bibles just put it in the footnotes. And the reason for that is the Gospel of John has been transcribed and written down. Scribes would copy the Gospel of John down word for word, and then they would pass it on. And sometimes scribes would put in certain footnotes to kind of explain certain things. And so when we look at all of the different manuscripts, all of the old manuscripts that we have of the book of John, the vast majority of them don't have that verse, that little explanation in it. So some Bibles, when they're translating it, they'll add that in there as a verse, and then others will just put it in the footnotes. And I mean, while we're on this subject, might as well talk about it, right? Because people, you'll hear this argument all the time, like, man, the Bible can't be the word of God because it's like the game of telephone or telestrations. If you guys have ever played, has anyone played telestrations? That game is wild. It's hilarious, especially with people that aren't artistic. But anyways, what happened, so people have this argument like, okay, the Bible was written, the book of John was written in like 60 AD, and then someone copied it, and then someone took that copy and they copied it, and someone took that copy and they copied it, and they took that copy and copied it. So the Bible, this gospel that we have now is probably so far off from the original writing that the author, John, did. But the truth of the matter is that that's way off. That's way wrong. Because people, when they, like, let's use the New King James, for example. When they made the New King James Bible, they didn't translate it from the King James Bible. They didn't take the King James Bible and say like, okay, let's make this easier to understand without the these and the thous. That's not what they did. What they do, every time they bring out, like the ESV, for example, they go back to the oldest and original and best manuscripts that they have, and they translate them, they transcribe them, whatever your word you want to use, from those manuscripts. They don't use manuscripts that were written like 100 years ago, 200 years ago. They go all the way back to the ones written thousands of years ago, and then they transcribe those. And so what we have, the truth of the matter is the Bible that we have today is more accurate and closer to word for word what the authors wrote back in the day because of, one, the amount of manuscripts that we have from thousands of years ago. And when you compare and contrast those, how accurate those are to each other. And then when we go back and we translate that, it's like the Bible that we have today, because they're finding more and more and more manuscripts archaeologists are unfolding more and more manuscripts as we speak. And so we have more and more things to go off of to ensure that this Bible that we have is as close to it possibly can be to the original authors. And I hope that made sense. But what was I even talking about? Manuscripts. Where did that start? Oh yeah, thank you guys. That verse is is not in most of the manuscripts, but in some of them, because sometimes scribes, wow, let's move on. So in this time, the people believed in this legend. They believed in this myth that an angel would come down and they would stir the water. And if you were the first person to get into this pool, then you would experience healing. And a lot of people think that this legend came from the Greek god Asclepius. Is that how you say it, Josh? Where's Josh? Is it Asclepius? The Greek god Asclepius, who was the god of healing. And obviously, I'm not a Greek Roman gods mythology kind of dude. So if you guys have questions about that, Josh just told me right now that he would love to talk to you. So you can go ahead, sit down with Josh. He loves conversations about mythology. So you can talk to him. But back in the day, man, that belief rang true. A lot of people believed that legend. So they would sit down, these people that were blind. And lame doesn't mean they just weren't cool. Right? It didn't mean that they weren't they didn't have the coolest fashion and all that other stuff. And maybe if I go in the water, my clothes will be cooler. That's not what it meant. Lame meant they couldn't walk. Like they had some form of paralysis. But anyway, so the blind, the lame, the sick would come to this place and they would hope that they could experience healing. And the people here are the lowest people on the social ladder. Man, these are the people that were insignificant. They didn't even have anybody that would care for them. Man, these were the kind of people that their families have ditched them, deserted them, and they are just sitting here around this pool with nothing to live for, nothing to hope for, except maybe someday I can get into this pool when it stirs and I can be healed. So in verse 5, it says, one man was there who had been an invalid, and this word invalid just means that this man had some form of sickness. And we learned that it prohibited him from walking or moving for 38 years. And when you think about that, when you try to put yourself in this man's shoes, because I think that's something that's important for us to do when we're reading the Bible. It's like, let's try to put ourselves, let's try to get into the headspace that these people are in. Man, this dude has been sitting at this pool, who knows how long, but we know that it was a long time. But this man couldn't move for 38 years. And it's not like nowadays where it's because this guy didn't have a screen. This guy didn't have a phone. This guy didn't have nurses and doctors that were there at every beck and call that he had. Man, this dude was sitting on and laying on probably a very uncomfortable bed or mat or whatever the heck he had, not being able to move or anything. And it's like, dude, I cannot. All he could do is just sit there and look at the same thing every single day. And look at the same people every single day. And we're going to learn that all he did was look at this water. And when the water would stir, he would just watch all of these people jump into the water and try to get healed, with him just sitting there alone, not being able to make it in his own strength. Like, I cannot imagine where this man was mentally. I cannot imagine the kind of depression that this guy felt. When I think about this man's life, man, that is as hopeless. That is as hopeless as I could possibly imagine right now. That's his entire life. Like, this dude has nothing to live for. Like, what does this guy have to live for? And then Jesus enters the scene in verse 6. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, Jesus said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" So last week, we talked about Jesus healing a son who was sick and about to die. And a father traveled from Capernaum all the way to Cana, where Jesus was, which was a really long time back in that day, to advocate for his son and ask Jesus to come with him back to his home so that he could heal his son. But this dude right here, and Jesus ends up doing it, but this guy here, this guy is unable to go to Jesus. This guy has no one to advocate for him. This guy's physically cannot even go to Jesus. So what does Jesus do, man? Jesus initiates. Jesus pursues this guy. Jesus is this man's advocate, and he goes up to him and he asks him a super interesting question. Do you want to be healed? And when you hear that initially, it's like, bro, Jesus, if you just look at that surface level, you're like, Jesus, that's got to be one of the most ignorant questions I've ever heard in my life. This fool's been sitting here for 38 years, not even able to walk. And you're going to ask him if he wants to be healed? Like, Jesus, what are you talking about? But Jesus is God. Jesus knows all things. Jesus knows what he's doing. And we've already seen in the first 4 books of John that Jesus's initial statement or Jesus's responses to people are so different and so out of the blue from what we would expect. But he always has a purpose in what he's saying. So when Jesus asked this question to this man, what he's doing is he's pulling out. He's giving this guy, man, he's shining a light on what this guy is doing. He's shining a light on what this guy has been putting his hope in. In this scene, I don't know if you guys, has anybody watched The Chosen? Who in here has watched The Chosen and seen the scene? Man, dang, I would expect more people, but anyways. There's this scene, I do encourage you guys to watch this episode of The Chosen because I think they do such an incredible job specifically with this encounter that Jesus has. Because when Jesus interacts with this man, you can tell when they do this scene what Jesus's intention is. He's pulling out, he's asking this guy, what are you doing here? Why are you here? You see what you're putting your hope in, right? You see that this isn't something that's going to make you whole. You see that this isn't something that's going to fulfill you. That's what Jesus is asking in this. And how does the man respond? He says, and this kind of reveals his heart. He says, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool." So what is the question? Do you want to be healed? What do you think the answer would be? Yeah, of course I do. But that's not what this man answers. What does he say? "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. And while I'm going, another steps down before me." Jesus is revealing and opening this dude up to what he's been putting his hope in. He's revealing to this dude that, man, and I mean, you can't judge this guy, man. You cannot look at this guy and be like, "Man, I can't believe that you didn't trust in God." It's like, dude, this guy nothing has helped this man for 38 years. This is literally all he has left. This dude has put his hope, I'm sure this guy has put his hope in so many other things, but this is where he's stuck. And we get it too, because when you put your hope in something and then you're let down, and then you put your hope in something and you're let down, and you put your hope in something and you're let down, you don't want to experience that pain of being let down anymore. So this guy, I'm sure, has built up walls, or every time he goes into that water, maybe I wasn't the first one in. Maybe someone else was there before me. And he has come up with this excuse so that he's not let down again. But Jesus is letting him know, he's reminding him, dude, this isn't going to make you whole. What you're doing is wasting your life. You're putting your hope in the wrong thing. So then Jesus, man, tells him something crazy. Jesus says to him, "Get up, take up your bed, and walk." And do you guys recognize when we go through the miracles of Jesus, because we've already talked about Jesus turning water into wine. We've already talked about Jesus healing the son. What do you see? What do you see is a commonality or a pattern that Jesus has when he heals people? He always gives them a call to action every time. When he changed the water into wine, what did he tell the servants? He said, take a cup of the water and take it to the master of the feast. That was a step of faith that these guys had to do. They're like, dude, we just filled these jars up with water and you want me to take water to the master of the feast? That was a call to action. So these dudes had to take some water. And this is the thing, like, who knows when the water was actually turned to wine? Who knows if it was before when they scooped it up and they're like, oh my gosh, it's wine. Or if they scoop it up and they're like, wow, I'm about to look like an idiot right now before this feast. And they're walking, looking at it, still water. Give it to the master of the feast. And then as he goes to drink it, it becomes wine. I don't know. I like to think about these kinds of things. With the son, what does he say? He tells the father, go back home. Your son will live. The father had to trust Jesus, leave Jesus, and go back to his home. He had to believe in Jesus enough to act on it. And now what is he telling this guy? He says, get up, take up your bed, and walk. And at once, it says the man was healed. He took up his bed and walked. Now the day was the Sabbath. So this man obeys and this man is healed. And again, this is one of those things that I like to think about. Like, which came first? Did he realize that he was healed and then attempted to get up? Or was it his attempt, as he attempted to get up, not feeling any different than he did before, did the healing come? I don't know. But to me, it seems like when I read scripture, when I look at the Bible and I see how God works, man, it seems like it is pretty consistent that God honors steps of faith. God honors steps of faith. So I like to believe, and this is just personal opinion, this isn't written in the Bible, obviously, but I like to believe that as this man attempted to get up, feeling the exact same, man, Jesus heals him. He gives him that call to action. So he stands up on his own two legs for the first time in 38 years. Stands up for the first time in 38 years. This dude picks up his mat that he's been laying on for who knows how long. And you think at first, like, dude, why did Jesus tell him to pick up his mat? We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then this dude walks on his own 2 feet for the first time in 38 years. Can you imagine what this dude is feeling in this moment? Can you imagine how filled with life, how filled with hope this guy feels in this moment? I mean, Jesus just completely transformed the trajectory of this guy's whole life. What was he going to do for the rest of his life? He was going to sit on that bed and watch people jump into this pool for the rest of his life until the day he died. But Jesus, man, he steps into the scene and he transforms this dude's life. And it says on this very last statement in verse 9, the last sentence, it says, now that day was the Sabbath. And it's important for us to know that for the second half of the story, which we're going to talk about in a couple weeks. But just so that you know kind of what we're going to be talking about, the reason why Jesus tells this dude to pick up his mat, because it seems like kind of weird that Jesus would ask him to pick up his mat, picks up his mat right on the Sabbath, and according to tradition, according to the Pharisaical tradition, the religious leaders of that day, the Jewish religious leaders, if you carried anything on the Sabbath, sorry, dude, I should have just pointed a chair out to you. I'm sorry, but I'm glad you're here. If you carried anything on the Sabbath, you would be considered breaking Jewish law, and you would be punished. But Jesus explicitly tells this dude, pick up your mat because Jesus has a purpose, like we talked about before. Every single thing that Jesus does is purposeful. Jesus has intention for every single thing he does. He doesn't just like randomly say things and like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. No, he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly what this man that was just healed is going to have to experience with the Pharisees. And Jesus is essentially, man, slapping these Pharisees in the face with some goodness and reality. But we'll talk about that in a couple weeks. So anyways, that's what just happened. That's this story. So now, let's try to make this practical and applicable for us. So this whole idea of being blind, lame, and paralyzed, these in the Bible often symbolize like a spiritual blindness or a spiritual paralysis. So with blindness, a lot of times it will symbolize being like blind to the truth, right? Refusing to accept the truth. Or this idea of being paralyzed is something that, like, for example, when the Bible talks about us being slaves to sin, you are paralyzed. Maybe you are paralyzed by fear. Maybe you're paralyzed by your sin. Maybe you're paralyzed by addiction. And another word to think about it is like, what is that thing? Because all of us have these things in our lives, man. All of us are sinners. All of us are messed up. All of us are on a journey. When you give your life to Christ, there's two things that happen. This is just a little side note. There is justification, and then there is sanctification. There's these two. There's the sanctification. You are justified. So justification, when you give your life to Christ, being justified means that you are just as if you never sinned. Man, you give your life to Christ, you put your faith in Jesus, you say, Jesus, you are my God, you are my Father, and I will live the life that you want me to live. Man, I want to live my life for you, to honor you and be in a relationship with you. Then God wipes every sin away. You're justified. But there's a process of sanctification that takes place after you are justified. The process of sanctification is God molding you, God transforming you. I almost like to think of it as like God chipping away little pieces and creating this beautiful statue or this beautiful picture of this man or woman that he wants you to be. And that process of sanctification, man, sometimes hurts. There's certain things in our lives that we hold on to. There's certain things in our lives that we are prone to go to that God doesn't want there, that are replacing God. So what in your life, man, is holding you back from living your life in the way in which God intended it? What is holding you back? What is that thing that you go to that is stopping you from maturing in your relationship with Jesus? What is that thing that is stealing your time? What is that thing that is replacing God when things are tough or when things are stressful? It could absolutely be addiction. Man, a lot of people, and that's the thing with pornography, man. We talk about pornography a lot. Why? Because every single person in this room has been exposed to pornography. Many people in this room are addicted to pornography. Why? Because it's like a freaking drug, man. When you watch porn and you masturbate and you do all this other stuff, there is a chemical reaction that happens in your brain that is equivalent to you doing like hard drugs. And so it is so heavily and so easy to get addicted to something like that. So there's many people in this room that are struggling with that. Don't think that just because we're in church, everyone else is good and you're the only one. If you're addicted to porn right now and you're the only one like that and everyone else in here is perfect because you're gosh darn wrong. That's not true at all. Man, maybe that's your vice. Maybe that's what you go to when you're stressed out or when things are hard or when you're feeling lonely. Maybe it's social media. And maybe it's video games. It's like, what are these are such good things for us to realize. Like, what are those things that I go? Where do I tend to go when I'm feeling lonely, when I'm feeling stressed out, when I'm feeling exhausted? Is it Netflix? Is it social media, man? Is it YouTube? Is it pornography? Is it food, man? Is it smoking? Is it vaping? There's all these different things that we try to go to replace God with. And a lot of times, man, we're paralyzed by these things. We become slaves to these things, and that's what the Bible talks about. We are slaves to sin. And this whole idea of being a slave, this is something we've been talking about in the book. It's something that, like, you literally lose your freedom, because when you think about it, it's like, man, I don't want to go to that. For me, one of the things, just to be completely like transparent and honest with you guys, like one of the things that I recognize as we're going through that is YouTube for me. Like I love going on YouTube and like watching debates and all this other stuff. So when I'm just chilling, and this is a cultural thing for sure. When you're just hanging out and you're doing nothing, what do? You whip your phone out. And you go and you either go on social media, or for me, you go on YouTube and you watch Jordan Peterson destroy someone like on some kind of like conversation or interview, and it like pumps me up. But anyways, for me, I recognize like, man, that is my vice. That's what I go to. And and I realize, man, that's not something I want to do. And when I realized that's not something I want to do, and then I kept doing it, it was like, oh my gosh, this thing controls me. Like I literally don't want to do this, but I have trained my mind, I have trained my body, I have enslaved myself to this action of any time that I'm bored or lonely or whatever it is, I whip my phone out and I start watching these things. And this idea, man, that we have been freed in Christ, and God has given us, I am so thankful for the way that God has designed our minds, because we do not have to be slaves to sin. God has given us the ability to choose. What's up, Tony?
I figured, sometimes this is on my mind of what to do, but sometimes I've been thinking like, maybe this would be a good idea to do besides watching all the junk and all the stuff
right.
that is out there. I was thinking maybe it would be good if not just me, but if everyone just takes a day and just listens to Christian music.
There you go.
And watch sermons.
Nice.
With all the junk stuff.
Dude, that's good. Thank you, Tony. So one thing that Tony, this idea that Tony is mentioning is something else that we talked about, is this idea of fasting. Man, fasting, in fact, let's just talk about it, man. Holy Spirit activate, right? Let's just go with the flow. Fasting, a lot of us have this idea in our minds that fasting is like, oh, I'm addicted to social media, I'm addicted to Netflix, I'm addicted to video games, I'm addicted to XYZ. I'm just gonna stop doing that for a couple days. But there is something, fasting, that is not what fasting is. That is abstinence. There you go. Abstinence, thank you. I forgot the word. I was like, don't have sex with people. What's the word? Abstinence. Abstinence. For those of you, anyways. Moving on. Abstinence. That is abstaining, choosing to abstain from something like that. That's abstinence. But fasting is specifically for food. And why is fasting specifically for food? Fasting, man, is refusing to give your body something that your body actually needs. Because what you're doing is you are training your body and you are disciplining your body, man, to listen to you. Instead of you controlling your body, instead of your body controlling you. And so when you're fasting, man, and this is something that I've been challenged with recently, obviously. I feel like God has been bringing it up a lot in different, from completely different sources. This concept has come up, and then just add Tony to the mix. This idea of fasting, man, of giving up, choosing to tell your body, no, you are not going to get what you think that you need, right? Because we can go, 40 days, 39 or 30. You can go a really long time without eating and not die. But your body tells you, 6 hours into fasting, what does your body tell you? Dude, if we don't eat food right now, we are going to wither away and die. That's what your body's telling you. But you are disciplining yourself and you are saying, no, body, you aren't controlling me. I am in control of you. Man, and what that does is that gives us, that grows us in our spiritual walk. And the Bible talks about fasting in a lot of different areas, man. Jesus fasted, the prophets fasted. There was so many people in the Bible that fasted. And so if there's something in your life, this is just an encouragement for you. If there is something in your life that has a stronghold on you, something in your life that you feel that you cannot let go of, man, I do encourage you, man, to practice this spiritual discipline of fasting. Man, go a day, go a couple days without eating food. Man, and do it purposefully. Don't do it to lose weight or something, you crazies. That's not what fasting is for. Man, you fast and you pursue God, man, and you will see, and I have experienced this in my personal life, man, how this transforms your way of thinking. And God molded our brains like they are moldable. They're not like concrete. It's like a moldable plastic. And your brain literally goes. You can destroy your brain with pornography because it literally rewires your brain and how it functions. You can destroy your brain with all kinds of different things. But with time, God is so gracious that he has allowed our mind to go back, man, to read. I can't even think of a good word. To reorient, rewire, there you go, to its original place. Wow, that didn't come out very good, but the idea was communicated. So, what are you replacing God with? There it is. Maybe, I'm just going to keep giving examples. Maybe it's status. Maybe it's what people think about you. Maybe that's what you're a slave to. Maybe it's politics. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's romantic relationships. There's so many things that literally steal our time because our minds get so focused on these things that we no longer live in the present, but now we're living in this false reality that we're creating in our minds. But anyways, the next question is, what pool are you sitting by? What pool are you sitting by? What are you putting your hope in and never finding any healing in? Because that's why we go to these things, because we think we're going to find satisfaction. Why do you continue to look at pornography? Man, because you think that even if you're not consciously thinking this, subconsciously, you are telling yourself, this will make it better. This will make me feel better. When you go to social media, when you go to Netflix, when you go to all these different things, politics, you are telling yourself, if I dig into this, this is going to make me feel better. Or this is going to distract me from the feeling that I'm feeling. That's what, alcohol, vaping, marijuana, getting high, that's what these things do. We try to escape our problems. We try to escape reality. But what is the reality? When you come back, man, when you're sober again, all of your issues are there, and sometimes you have even more because you made some stupid decisions while you were in a wrong state of mind. But anyways, let's go back to the story, and let's look at everything that Jesus does. So Jesus goes to Jerusalem. Jesus goes to the pool of Bethesda. Jesus sees this man. Jesus walks right up to this man. Jesus speaks to this man, and Jesus reveals the truth to this man. Then Jesus gives this man a call to action, and Jesus heals this man. Do you see everything that Jesus is doing for this man? Jesus initiated in every aspect. Jesus initiated in every possible way, and guess what? That is exactly what Jesus does for you. That is exactly what Jesus has done for you and for me. Jesus died on the cross for you 2,000 years before you were even born. And the Bible talks about in Psalm 139 that he knew you, he knows you. God knew you before the creation of the world. He had already created you in his mind's eye and loved you fully and completely, knowing that he was going to die for you and wanting to have that personal relationship with you. That's why he created you. He is the initiator. He makes the first move towards us. And the crazy thing is, Jesus knows you, man, and he sees you. And he still died for you. When I think about this in my human way, if I knew me, if I was Jesus, and I looked at me and knew every single thing that I have done in my life, every single thought that I have had in my life, I would be like, heck no, dude. There's no way that guy is worthy of dying for. But Jesus, man, God knows everything that I have done in my life, every evil, wicked, selfish, prideful, lustful thought I have had in my life, and every one I'm going to have for the rest of my life. And he still chose me. He still chose to die for me. He still pursued me. And the same goes for you. He knows every single thing you did. He knows every sick, twisted, evil thing that you did in your past. every sick, twisted, evil thing you've thought, and everything you're gonna do and gonna think for the rest of your life, yet he still died for you. He still created all the little circumstances to get you here sitting in the seat hearing this. When you think about that, man, when you think about the way God works and the way God orchestrates things and brings people to certain places and brings people to certain relationships and then speaks to them and does some radical transformation, it is mind-blowing. It is mind-blowing. But that is what God does. That is what God is doing in your life, man. He is pursuing you and he's speaking to you. But the question is, man, are you listening? Because I'm sure for every single Christian in this room, every believer in this room, he is giving you a call to action. And you know what it is. Maybe he's been giving you the same call to action for a long time, but you just haven't done it. Either because of fear or because you're just like, man, Jesus, please don't touch that thing. That's what we talked about last week. Jesus, you can call me to do something in all these different other areas, but not this one. God, I'm too scared about what people are going to think about me. I'm too scared what's going to happen to my future. I'm too scared about what's going to happen in my life. Man, I guarantee you God is giving you a call to action, but the question is, man, do you believe in him enough to do something about it? Do you trust him enough to take that step of faith and allow him to do what he does and heal? Allow him to do what he does and radically transform the trajectory of your life. Do something that you never thought was even possible. Because that is what Jesus does. I'm going to read you guys this passage from, oh snap, what time is it? Okay, we got like an hour. No, I'm just kidding. That's not. I'm going to read you guys a passage from this book. And this is one of my favorite books right now. It's called The Singer, and it's by Calvin Miller. And what it is it's a poem. It's like a poem about the life of Jesus. And it is so freaking beautiful, man. It's crazy. But anyways, Jesus is represented as the singer. And what he does is he sings the ancient star song. That is essentially his deity coming out. And the Father, God the Father, is known as Earth Maker. So anyways, I'm going to read this experience that the singer has with this worker. And yeah, I'm just going to read it, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. So it says, and it's kind of long, but bear with me. From night to day and back to night again, he traveled on. He saw the glow of the great city far on the horizon, and just the light of it roused expectancy and fear. By twilight, he was weary, and he turned aside to sleep beside a moonlit stream. The water fell in froth and white cascades into the wooden lattice of a creaking wheel. The miller, who was still at work, seemed most determined to finish out of his toil by starlight. It was only by the merest chance he found the singer sleeping by the stream just above the giant wheel. For a moment, he saw the singer only as a vagrant and was inclined to drive him from the premises. But then he changed his mind and invited him to share the evening meal. As they went into the grain room, the singer looked upon the great machine with which the giant stones which milled the grist. The singer was about to ask him where he found the mason to quarry such impressive stones when suddenly he discovered that one of the miller's hands had been badly scarred and crippled. "Can you run so great a stone with but a single hand?" the singer asked. "I manage, though it was much easier with two." "Did you lose your hand in this machinery?" "I was in much too great a hurry 3 harvest times ago. I was trying to sweep the grist away when I dropped my broom upon the floor stone. When I reached to pick it up, the great stone caught my arm and hand. And when they rolled the grinder back, this was all that I had left," he said. "I will," observed the singer, "make it useful once again if you will just desire it whole and believe it can be." "It cannot be so easy, singer. Would you wave your magic wand above such suffering and have it all be done with? I sometimes wake at night with a searing flame of fire and throbbing agony alive through all this twisted, dying limb. You have both hands and cannot understand this sort of pain." "I have no pain like yours, but I have a healing melody. Earthmaker gave the song to me for healing hands like yours. Already it has helped a little girl to be made whole. Was her hand as badly mangled as my own? It was her legs, but yes, they were. How often I have wished that I might trade a useless hand for such a leg, the miller interrupted. Why either? Why not simply be made whole? Oh, that such a healing now were possible, the speed I might regain in working at the mill. But no, it cannot be. Can you not understand? Have you no sympathy for suffering? Are you so empty of conscience as to suggest a hopeless remedy? You only add to misery by forcing me to see myself a cripple. I soon shall have to close the mill or sell it. I cannot make the necessary quota since the accident occurred. There is power within the melody, I know, to make you well. Please, miller, trust and let me sing, and you will run the mill alone with two good hands. Stop your mocking. I'm a sick old man whom life has cheated of a hand. The nightly pain has already now begun. The season of my hope is gone. The singer watched him caught in some dread spasm of his aching circumstance. He moaned and fell upon the floor, and with his healthy fingers he held his mangled hand. His surging pain caused him to cry, "Oh God, deliver me from this body. I never can be made well and whole as other men." He waited for the singer to join him in his pity, but when he raised his head for understanding, the door stood open on the night, and the singer was nowhere to be seen. There is a genuine difference between waiting on God and making excuses as to why you're not moving forward. There is a genuine difference between waiting on God and making excuses as to why you are not moving forward. So the question is, and this is a good time of self-reflection for all of us, man, which one are you doing? Are you saying, Jesus, man, I'm not ready to let go of this? Or Jesus, man, I'm tired, I can't do it? Are we willing to trust Jesus with our actions? Because with belief comes action. If you really believed something, you do something about it. And the example I love to use is these chairs, man. All of you guys believe that these chairs will hold your weight. If you didn't believe it, you'd be standing up with Danny over there. Actually, Danny's sitting down, never mind. I think Wedo's standing. Be standing up with Wedo. But you guys believe, man, that these chairs can hold your weight. Your actions prove what you believe. You believed it, so you did something about it. The same holds true, man, with your relationship with God. If you really trust God, if you really trust him, then you will take that step of faith and do what he has called you to do. And I'm just going to let you know, man, he is trustworthy. He is consistent. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Jesus is the way, the truth of the life, man. So let's let go of our excuses. Let's pick up our mat and let's walk. And let's just go on this crazy, beautiful trajectory that God has for us. He didn't create you for no reason, man. He's got a purpose and he's got a plan for you. Let's go ahead and pray and let's worship our God one more time. Father,